If your organization is funded via grants in any type of form or fashion, then you are going to want to stay tuned to this video. Today, I'm going to be showing you 2 different ways that you can track your grants in QuickBooks Online. And I'm also going to show you how you can upload, import, add a budget, whichever one you prefer in QuickBooks Online that is grant-based, right, for this particular grant versus just for the organization. And so if any of that sounds good to you, keep watching. Okay, so here we are. This is a test nonprofit. What you'll see here has been stuff that has just been added by me, and I didn't want this to be too perfect. So you'll see I might stumble through a little bit because I'm going to be adding things as we actually do it and walk through it so you can actually see what it takes to do said thing. The first thing we're going to do is walk through the first way that you can track your grants in QuickBooks Online, and that is using the P&L report essentially, but filtering your P&L by customer. So let's get into that. So first off, let's just make sure we have the customers set up. We only have 2 customers set up. We have DHS and the Green Foundation. So we're good there. So in your dashboard, when transactions would come in your categorizing, you want to make sure that you're not only booking to the correct account, but that you are also indicating who is the customer. Now, these transactions have already been added, right? And so we can't do it there, but you know what? Let's go ahead and let's just make one up for the sake of this example. We are going to say that we got the office cleaned. Right? We're going to say that this nonprofit operates in person. They got the office cleaned and DHS allows them to expense office cleaning. We'll say this is programs, but the biggest thing here is indicating who the customer is. And this customer particularly is DHS. And we're going to say, let's say the cleaning was, I don't know, $500. Let's save and close that. Just to kind of put a bow on what we just did. Essentially, it would be any transactions that came in when you're closing the books, let's say for that month. Any transactions, you make sure you categorize it to the correct chart of account, and you make sure that each transaction is put to that particular customer, which in this case would be whoever like that funder is. And in this example, that's DHS. So if I wanted to see, okay, well, how much money did DHS give us? How much money did we spend? We're going to run a P&L, but then we're going to filter by the customer. So in this case, we're going to do all dates because these dates are all over the place. Remember, this is a test, not perfect. So this gives us all of the income and expenses. We're then going to customize and we're going to go to filter and we're going to go to customer and we are going to click DHS and then we're going to run a report. So here, what we see is that we have $400,000 in government grants and contracts from DHS as well as grant income. Now, naturally, this wouldn't be the case, right? So typically, wherever the funding came from for DHS, we would put it to the same income accounts. The idea, though, is to make sure whatever income was given to the organization, whatever grant, right, that came from DHS, that we would indicate that it was from DHS. And that's what we did here. Name DHS, the expenses. So we see here so far, $10,000 has been spent against this grant. Real simple way if you wanted to kind of just, do a check to see how much money did we spend so far, and what categories did we spend? Because the other thing is that some grants you can only spend in certain categories, right? So you might take a look at this and see small tools and equipment. What's that? Like they didn't give us a budget for equipment. And so you might have to determine, okay, wait, I can't even allocate this to DHS. Just wanted to show you really straightforward how you can track it using the P&L. That is the first way to track it. The second way is using projects. Now, a lot of times, especially in New York, you will have an agency, a government agency. So let's say DHS is one of those, right? But they can issue you different grants and contracts. In this case, we're going to say that DHS is the funder, but the actual grant is called Help Me Howard. What we would do here, so you kind of see it set up already, but I'm going to take a step back and show you actually how I set it up, and then we'll dig into this actual example. So you would go to new project, you would give the project a name. So let's say in this case, the name would have been Help Me Howard, and then we would have said, who's this project for? And we would select the funder, right? In this case, the funder would be DHS. You also see that here, right? Customer, DHS. Some grants have a start and end date, right? Some grants are annual. You have to spend down by the end of the year. Some are multi-year, but essentially you would put in the start date, the end date, the status, right? And then you would click save. That's how we got here. Okay, so now I'm going to click into Help Me Howard. This gives me a bit more detail. Some of the things that we did with the first way, you would do here. This just gives a little bit, a bit of a different view. And there's also a specific report that we can run when we use projects. So I'll get into that. Let's be clear on what the expenses and the income is. And so here we see that there's grant income, right, that we received from DHS. And we're going to click on that just so I can show you. So you see here, the name is not just DHS, is DHS Help Me Howard. So we had to be specific because it wasn't just a high-level DHS grant. DHS gave us a specific grant. So in this case, we click here and you see $30,000 was what they gave, right? And we indicated that that came from DHS Help Me Howard. Then what expenses, right? So when you're closing the books, you see your expenses, you have to indicate, okay, what goes towards Help Me Howard versus what goes towards, something else. Just to show you, you see here, customer project. So you have customer is DHS. This project is a sub under DHS because it's its own project, but it comes from DHS. So you see here, so we wouldn't just select DHS if it really is for Help Me Howard because we want to be as specific as possible. You see it says customer/project. But before you even get here, you have to make sure the project is actually set up for tracking. And that was the first part that we did when we went to add a project. Just wanted to point that out. So now if we were to go back here, now we have $30,000 that we're expecting from DHS. You see it says open invoices. So that means that we invoiced them for the $30,000. They didn't get it to us yet, but that's neither here nor there for this example, but that's where the $30,000 came from. So this is what we're expecting from DHS Help Me Howard. What expenses did we have so far for DHS Help Me Howard? We had contract and professional fees of $7,000 and some kind of office expenses, which you can, of course, drill down into, of $2,500. That totals $9,500. This tells us how much we have left to spend on this specific grant. Let's get into some of the other things that you can see. Transactions. If we wanted to dig into the details, okay, well, what exactly is even in here? This tells us here. If there were employees that were tracking time, this is where we start getting a little bit more complex, right? But we know that a lot of times, certain grants will cover salaries for certain employees. And so if there were employees that should have been tracking time against this grant, there's a way to set that up and you can track it here. And then project reports, right? You have project profitability. If we were tracking time, the ability to see the time cost by employee, unbilled time and expenses, because some grants, as you may know, are billable, right? You might have to spend first and then invoice for the money. And so important to know. And then estimates versus actuals. Typically, the report that we would run most often would be this first one. So let me show you what that looks like. And this is just showing overall for the life of the grant, how much we received, how much was spent. Again, as you can see, it is very similar to the first way that we were tracking, with the exception that this is for Help Me Howard and not for DHS overall, which is why you only see 30,000 and not that 400,000, because that 400,000 was not for Help Me Howard. So that's why we always have to be very specific with who our money came from. That's what the project report looks like. If we were to set up estimates, they say estimates versus actuals. Another way to word that would be budgets versus actuals. We'd be able to see what was budgeted versus what was spent, and of course the difference, so we know how much we had. Now there's another way to do that, which is going to be that bonus way that, I told you I would show you. But then lastly, you have attachments. And I did want to point this out because we are believers of, making our life easy. So typically what we would do here is we would actually attach the grant agreement. So whatever grant agreement we received for Help Me Howard, we would actually attach it here so that we didn't have to go looking for it in the event that we were doing, some kind of work or reporting on that particular grant and wanted to maybe refer back to the grant agreement. It all would live here. And so this is the second way. I really like projects because I feel like you get a bit more of a deeper view. I love this view better than just looking at the P&L, but that's my preference. Last thing I'm going to show you is budgets. Now, a lot of these grants typically come with budgets, and you typically have to track budget to actuals. That's why we say, too, when you are creating your monthly financial reporting package, you don't only create it for the organization, but you should also be creating it for the individual things that you're tracking. This would be one of them, right? So if you have grants that you are having to spend down on, that you're maybe having to report on, you want to see what that budget to actual looks like. Kind of started it, but I paused because I wanted to be able to show you guys. So you can create multiple budgets, and you can create the overall organizational budget. But let's say we wanted to come in and we wanted to create just the Help Me Howard budget. That's what this is, but I'm gonna show you how I set it up at first. So we would click create budget. We would select whatever period it was for, and then we would click subdivided budget, because we need to be clear that we want this budget to be by customer. And then we'd have to select who is that customer. In this case, it's Help Me Howard. Then we select Help Me Howard, and then we click next, and it create the budget for us, where we'd have to then plug in the numbers. So now I'm going to take you to the part where this is what that is. So here is where you can determine, is your budget by yearly, by the year, quarter, monthly. In this case, we're saying it's yearly. We have Help Me Howard. And so let's just say $30,000 is what they expected in income. Now here you would be plugging in these numbers from the actual budget that you received from the funder, pretending that I got that already. So let's say they told me we could spend $4,500 in accounting fees. They said we could spend another $1,000 in legal. Remember, this is all just playing around here. Now here, it's not showing any actuals because all those expenses is for dates. I think some of them dates are like 2022. So what I'm going to do is run all dates and see if we can look at it like that. So here you see the overall DHS budget, but that's not what we concerned with. So let's scroll on over. We try and look at Help Me Howard, right? Specifically. Oh, this is where I messed up at. You see, it was grant income, not government grants and contracts. So sorry, y'all. I want to fix this because I want to be able to give you guys a clear view of what this really should look like. Y'all are really getting about the behind the scenes nitty gritty. Okay. I didn't want this to be too perfect. So you could actually see that sometimes you fumble around a little bit. You make a mistake, or you might, forget to do something, or you might realize, you did something, wrong, whatever the case may be. We budgeted $30,000. So here we know we're supposed to receive $30,000, but we know we invoiced them $30,000, but they haven't given us the money back yet, which is why this shows that we haven't received anything yet. So naturally, that's going to be negative. So here, there's no actuals. We haven't spent there yet. This should be all dates. You see what I'm saying? So now we've received. We've indicated the pledge here. I'm assuming that's what, yep. It's going to show us the invoice because they're on accrual basis. So we've accrued for it. Supposed to receive 30. You see the actual contract and professional fees. We see that they gave us $5,500. They gave us $4,500 in accounting, $1,000 in legal. We've actually spent $7,000. Now, here's where this is where me being a stickler comes in, because I'd want to not just put to contract and professional fees. I'd want to know, who did I pay here? This should be specific. Like, was this for accounting or legal? So if I was somebody who came in and I was reviewing this, that would be one of the first questions that I would ask. Here is a good example of the budget says $1,000 can be spent towards more small tools and equipment. We've actually spent $2,500. So that means that $1,500 of this has to be moved from Help Me Howard because we're not able to. I think that's the thing that trips up organizations, because for some grants, if you spend in a category where you're not supposed to, especially for those grants that are reimbursable, they won't give you the money until you adjust. And so typically when you send them the report, you have to make sure that it is clear that what you've actually spent is an allowable expense and it's included in the budget. And so again, this is just an example of being able to not only track it by P&L, by customer, or by project, but also when you need to run reports at the end of the month, you should also be looking at the budget to actual for your grants just to indicate where they stand, because it helps you to make better decisions. If you have funds that you can spend down in a particular grant, or if you've accidentally spent in an area where you weren't supposed to and need to reallocate those funds, or whatever the case may be. So, okay, class, I hope this video was helpful. I know it was a bit more hands-on than normal, a lot of screen grabs, watching the screen, but hopefully you got the gist of what it takes to track your grants in QuickBooks Online. And remember, if you have any questions or if there's any part that you want me to dive deeper into, just drop it in the comments and I'll add it to my film schedule and we'll get it up sometime this year. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.